It genuinely seems programmed sometimes to the minute. And is that...
The palace is silent at 2 a.m, not the silence of a house where people are sleeping. Something older than that, heavier. The silence of stone corridors that have absorbed centuries of secrets and learned, across all of that time, how to keep them. The security camera in the East Corridor sees nothing unusual. The timestamp ticks forward. The frame holds steady on an empty hallway, lit by the low, pale wash of the overnight lights. And then the figure appears, moving carefully, deliberately, with the particular quality of someone who knows exactly where they are going and has decided that 2 a.m. is the right time to go there. The vault door opens, and somewhere deeper inside the palace, Princess Anne's eyes open too. She is already on her feet. The vault, what it contains and why, access to it, matters.
People don't change that much. I think they recognize those people whose commitment has been constant.
There are places inside a palace that most people will never see. Not the state rooms, not the formal reception spaces photographed for official occasions and occasionally opened for public tours, the other places, the ones that exist behind the visible architecture of the institution, behind the ceremonial surface that the monarchy presents to the world. In the parts of these buildings that the buildings themselves seem designed to make you forget exist. The royal vault is one of those places. And understanding why someone being found inside it at 2 a.m. is not simply a matter of trespass requires understanding what the vault actually is, what it holds, and what the protocols surrounding access to it are designed to protect. The vault is not a single room. That is the first thing to understand. It is a series of secured spaces within the palace structure whose combined contents represent something that goes well beyond monetary value. The jewels are there, pieces whose historical significance makes their worth, in any financial sense, almost incidental to what they mean institutionally. Items that have been present at coronations and state occasions, and the formal ceremonies of a monarchy that measures its progress in centuries rather than decades. But the jewels are not the most significant thing the vault contains. The documents are. Papers whose existence has never been fully cataloged in any public record. Correspondence that predates the current reign by generations. Private communications between monarchs and prime ministers and foreign heads of state, whose historical sensitivity is such that their public disclosure would produce consequences that go far beyond embarrassment into genuine diplomatic and constitutional territory. Family records of a different kind, private, personal, the kind that dynasties accumulate across centuries and that contain, within their accumulated pages, a version of events that differs in specific and significant ways from the official history. Access to any of this is not a matter of asking the right person on the right day. The protocols governing vault access are specific, documented, and enforced at a level commensurate with the sensitivity of what is being protected. There is a formal process. A limited number of people have the authority to initiate it. A logged record of every access event that creates a permanent audit trail of who entered, when, and under what authorization. That log exists for a reason. The vault has been the subject of security concerns before, not in ways that have produced public stories, but in ways that the people responsible for the palace's security apparatus are aware of and have responded to with the kind of institutional seriousness that the contents demand. The protocol surrounding vault access is not bureaucratic overcaution. It is the accumulated response to a history of understanding exactly how much damage the wrong person, accessing the wrong document at the wrong moment, can do to an institution whose legitimacy depends partly on the controlled nature of its historical record. When someone enters the vault without triggering the formal access process, without the logged authorization, without the oversight of the people whose role it is to provide and record that authorization, it is not a casual oversight. It is a serious breach of a protocol that exists because the alternative to enforcing it is an institution whose most sensitive contents are accessible to anyone with the physical means to reach the door. Now, Tom Parker Bowles. Reaching that door at 2 in the morning raises a specific and urgent question that the vault's access protocol is designed to make answerable. How did he get past the formal access protocol? Because the vault does not open to social standing. It does not open to family connections. It does not open to the warm adjacency of being the son of the queen consort, or the stepson of the king, or the occupant of a royal adjacent property that places you within the orbit of the institution. It opens to authorization, one that must be very specific and tightly documented, provided by one of the limited number of people with the standing to provide it. Either Tom Parker Bowles had that authorization, which means someone with the standing to grant it gave it to him, in the middle of the night, for reasons that would need to be explained and that the formal log would record, or he did not have it, which means the vault door opened through a mechanism that bypassed the formal process entirely. And bypassing that process requires either a level of inside knowledge about the palace's security arrangements that a person in his position should not have, or the assistance of someone inside the palace who does have it and who used it on his behalf. Both possibilities are serious, in different ways, but at the same level of institutional gravity. The first points toward a sanctioned access whose authorization would create an uncomfortable trail of questions about who approved a 2 in the morning vault visit and why. The second point is toward something that the palace's security apparatus would classify with a word that nobody inside those walls has yet been willing to use publicly. Breach, not a social breach, not the kind of boundary overreach that has been documented across the months of this palace confrontations. A physical security breach of the most sensitive space in the building, and the camera was recording all of it from the moment the corridor went from empty to occupied. At that moment, the vault door moved. At that moment, Anne's footsteps became audible in the stone corridor outside. Every second of it, captured, time-stamped, and now, somehow, no longer contained within the palace walls where it was always supposed to remain. Tom Parker Bowles, who he is and how he got inside. Most people know Tom Parker Bowles as a food writer. The television appearances, the cookbooks, the restaurant reviews that have made him a recognizable presence in British food media for the better part of 2 decades. The affable, knowledgeable public persona of someone who has built a genuine career in a field he genuinely loves. Independent, professional, grounded in work that has nothing to do with the royal world he was born into. That is the version most people know. The version that matters for this story is more complicated. Tom Parker Bowles is Camilla's son, her firstborn. From her marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, the man she was with before Charles, during a significant portion of her relationship with Charles and until their divorce in 1995. He grew up in a household where the complications of his mother's most significant relationship were not abstract. They were present, in the atmosphere of his childhood, in the careful navigation of a family situation that required everyone in it to manage an unusual reality with unusual discretion. He has done that his entire life, managed it, maintained the public persona of the food writer while carrying the private reality of who his mother is and what that means for his relationship with the institution she now formally inhabits. He is not naive about that institution. He cannot be. You do not spend 40+ years as the child of someone at the center of the most complicated personal story in modern royal history without developing a precise and detailed understanding of how the palace works, of its formal structures and its informal ones, of where the lines are and how they are enforced and who has the standing to do what within its walls, which is precisely why the question of how he got inside at 2 in the morning is the question that nobody close to this situation has been able to answer in a way that holds up. Because Tom Parker Bowles understands the palace well enough to know that what he did should not have been possible. Or, more precisely, it should not have been possible without the kind of inside assistance that transforms a personal decision into an institutional problem with multiple parties. Let's walk through what getting inside the palace at that hour actually requires. Because the physical security of a building that houses the British monarchy is not a matter of a lock and a key and a guard who can be waved past with a familiar face. The palace at 2 in the morning is not unstaffed. It is not a building that simply rests overnight and resumes its security protocols in the morning. The overnight arrangements are different from the daytime ones, more concentrated, more reliant on electronic systems than human presence in certain areas, but functional, monitored, with protocols that distinguish between authorized presence and unauthorized presence and that are designed to flag the latter before it reaches the kind of sensitive location that the vault represents. Tom Parker Bowles's physical access to the building that night required navigation of those protocols, at a level that his status as a frequent visitor to the palace would not automatically provide. Frequent visitors have specific access parameters, specific areas they can reach, and specific areas they cannot. The vault is in the latter category regardless of who your mother is. Sources familiar with the palace's security architecture describe 2 possible explanations for how he reached the vault. Neither of them is comfortable. The first is that he was admitted and directed, that someone with the authority to bring a visitor through the overnight security protocols exercised that authority on his behalf, actively, knowingly, creating a logged record of his admission that exists in the palace's security system and that has been reviewed by the people responsible for understanding what happened that night. If this explanation is accurate, there is a document somewhere inside the palace's security records that shows who authorized Tom Parker Bowles's presence in that building at that hour. And that document is either being examined with great seriousness by the people who have oversight of it, or it has already been examined, and the nature of what it shows has produced a response that sources are being very careful not to fully describe. The second explanation is more concerning, that the access was not formally logged in the way authorized admissions are logged, that it occurred through a gap in the overnight protocols that either existed because of a human failure in the security operation or was created deliberately by someone who understood the system well enough to use its vulnerabilities. A gap of that nature in the overnight security of a royal palace is not a minor administrative finding. It is a significant security failure with implications that extend well beyond the specific events of that night. And here is the detail that sources keep returning to when this aspect of the story is pressed. The palace knows which of these explanations is accurate. The security review that followed Anne's discovery of Tom Parker Bowles in the vault would have established very quickly and very definitively how he got there. They know. They have known since that night. What they have not done is share that knowledge in any form that has reached the public record. And the gap between what they know and what they have said is currently where the most significant part of this story lives. Anne's discovery, the moment the footage begins to tell its story. Princess Anne does not sleep the way most people sleep. People who know her well have described her overnight habits for years. The early rising, the late hours. The particular discipline of someone whose relationship with rest is functional rather than indulgent. She sleeps when the body requires it and wakes when the mind is ready, which, for Anne, is often earlier and often more alert than most people would manage in the same building at the same hour. That habit, that specific and unremarkable feature of how Princess Anne moves through her nights, is the reason Tom Parker Bowles was not alone in that vault for as long as he planned to be. Let's set the scene properly, because the footage, the specific recording that has since become the center of this story, captures the corridor outside the vault with a clarity that makes the sequence of events it shows difficult to interpret as anything other than what it appears to be. The timestamp in the upper corner of the frame reads 2:17 in the morning. The corridor is empty. The light is the flat, institutional pale of overnight building illumination. Nothing moves. The camera records the unremarkable fact of an empty hallway for a period of several minutes. And then the figure enters the frame. The walk is the first thing the footage communicates. The particular quality of how Tom Parker Bowles moves through that corridor is not the walk of someone who has wandered into the wrong part of the building. It is not tentative, not exploratory, not the movement pattern of someone orienting themselves in an unfamiliar space. It is directed, purposeful. The walk of someone following a route they have either been given or have prepared in advance. He reaches the vault door. There is a pause, brief but visible on the footage, the pause of someone completing an access process. And then the door opens and the figure moves inside and the corridor is empty again. 4 minutes and 31 seconds pass. That is the duration that the footage shows between Tom Parker Bowles entering the vault and the second figure appearing in the corridor, Princess Anne. She enters the frame from the opposite end of the corridor, from the direction Tom Parker Bowles came. Her pace is different from his, quicker. The particular purposeful speed of someone who is moving towards something with a clear intention rather than following a prepared route to a destination. As if she heard something or noticed something or was drawn to this part of the building by a signal that the footage itself does not capture. She reaches the vault door. She stops. The door is not fully closed, a detail visible in the footage that the sources describing it consistently note. The door through which Tom Parker Bowles passed 4 minutes earlier is not properly secured behind him. Anne looks at the door for a moment, and the footage makes it feel longer than it is. And then she opens it. What happened inside that vault in the moments that followed is not captured by the exterior corridor camera. The footage that has emerged covers the approach and the entry, not the interior. What sources describe the confrontation itself are drawn from accounts rather than from any visual record. Those accounts describe a moment of considerable tension. Tom Parker Bowles' explanation in the immediate moment of discovery has been described by sources as involving a specific claim about the reason for his presence. The details of that claim are not fully established in any public account. What sources are willing to describe is Anne's reception of it, which was not warm, and it was not particularly prolonged. She did not engage with the explanation at length. She did not enter into a discussion about the merits of whatever justification was offered. She made clear, in the terms that Anne makes things clear, that the explanation was not sufficient and that the situation required a response that went beyond the immediate conversation in the vault. Tom Parker Bowles left the vault. Sources describe the departure as swift and as lacking the dignity that the occasion might have been managed to preserve under different circumstances. Anne's immediate actions after the vault was cleared and secured have been described in terms that confirm the seriousness with which she treated what she had found. She did not wait until morning to communicate what had occurred. She made contact that night with specific individuals within the palace whose knowledge of the incident she determined was required before the morning changed the nature of what would be possible to contain. Who she contacted is a detail that sources approach with particular care, because the specific people Anne reached out to in the hours after 2:17 that morning tell you a great deal about her assessment of what the incident represented and what needed to happen in response. She did not contact Charles first. That detail, the choice of who was informed before the king about something that happened inside his own palace involving his wife's son, is perhaps the most significant single fact in the entire account of that night. And it sits there, in the public domain now, because the footage leaked, because the account leaked, because the specific details of who Anne called and in what order leaked, and because once things leak from inside a palace, they tend to keep leaking. Camilla's position, when your son becomes the story. There are crises you can manage, difficult stories, uncomfortable allegations, the kind of negative coverage that a sophisticated communications operation can contain, redirect, and eventually outlast through a combination of strategic silence and carefully timed positive positioning. Camilla has survived more of those than most public figures ever face. She has the scar tissue to prove it and the operational knowledge of how these things work to manage them effectively when they arrive. And then some crises operate outside the reach of any communication strategy because they do not arrive through media channels or investigative reporting or the slow accumulation of hostile briefings. They arrive through events, real, documented, witnessed events that exist independently of how anyone chooses to characterize them. That has footage, that has timestamps, that has the particular intractability of something that actually happened in a physical space and was recorded by a camera that did not ask anyone's permission before it started rolling. This is that kind of crisis, and Camilla is facing it in the worst possible context, at the worst possible moment, after the worst possible sequence of preceding events. Let's start with the most basic question, the one that every account of this story circles without fully landing on. Did Camilla know her son was in that vault? Sources describe the palace's own investigation into this question as ongoing and as producing results that nobody inside those walls is yet willing to characterize publicly. The official position, to the extent that there is one of institutional silence on the specifics, no confirmation, no denial. The particular managed ambiguity that the palace deploys is when the truth of a situation is more damaging than the ambiguity around it. But silence on a question of this directness is itself a kind of answer. When the answer is clearly no, institutions say so, quickly, because a clear denial of prior knowledge is the most effective available response to a story that connects a senior figure to a serious security breach through their family member. The denial creates distance, establishes innocence, allows the communications operation to pivot from the defensive to the proactive. The palace has not produced that denial, not in the immediate aftermath of the story emerging, not in the days since, not through any of the channels, official or informal, that would carry such a denial if it existed in a form anyone was willing to put on record. That absence is being read by the people inside those walls and by the people covering this story from outside them in the way that significant absences always get read in situations like this. Now, whether Camilla knew or did not know, the institutional damage to her position from this story is severe in either case, if she did not know. Tom Parker Bowles' presence in the vault that night was entirely his own decision, pursued without his mother's knowledge or involvement. Then the story becomes one of a family whose proximity to the palace has generated such a casual attitude toward the institution's boundaries that a serious security breach occurred because someone in that family believed, apparently, that his access to the building and his family connection to its occupants made the vault's protocols something he could navigate on his own terms. That is a story about the dangers of allowing royal-adjacent figures too much informal access, too much comfort inside an institution whose formal boundaries they do not actually have the standing to cross. It is a story that feeds directly into the narrative that William's decisions about Greenheath and the broader recalibration of the extended family's proximity to the institution were not just symbolic gestures, but responses to a genuine and identifiable risk. The Greenheath decision looks prescient in this light, and Camilla, in that version of events, is not guilty of involvement, but is certainly implicated in the broader pattern of informal access that produced the conditions for the breach, if she did know. The implications require no elaboration. They are the kind that produce formal consequences, legal ones, constitutional ones, the kind that goes well beyond the institutional politics of palace positioning into territory that changes everything about what is possible for her going forward. The conversation between Camilla and Anne in the aftermath of that night has been described by sources with a consistency that suggests it happened and that it was not comfortable. Anne does not have comfortable conversations when uncomfortable ones are what the situation requires. And the situation required Anne to ask Camilla directly the question that everyone else was dancing around. What sources describe as Camilla's response is characterized as emotional, specifically and in ways that could be read multiple ways. Emotion that reads as genuine shock at her son's actions, or emotion that reads as the response of someone confronting the full weight of what a situation she was aware of has now become. Which version is accurate is the question that the palace's investigation is apparently working to answer, and that the footage, combined with the access log that must exist somewhere in the security system, may have already answered at the institutional level, even if that answer has not reached the public one. Camilla has survived extraordinary things. She is not a woman who folds easily under pressure, but she has never had her son inside a royal vault at 2 a.m. on security footage before. No version of this crisis fundamentally and permanently complicates an already precarious position. The footage. What it shows and why it leaked footage does not leak from inside a royal palace by accident. That needs to be stated clearly and held onto throughout everything that follows. Because the instinct, when security footage from a sensitive location surfaces publicly, is to reach for the explanation of an oversight, a technical failure, a junior member of staff who did not understand the protocols around what they were handling. The kind of accidental disclosure that removes intentionality from the picture and allows the institution to frame the leak as an unfortunate administrative failure rather than a deliberate act. That explanation does not hold here. The security footage from the palace's overnight cameras is not stored on a system where inadvertent sharing is a realistic risk. It is not on a network that a careless click or a misaddressed email could compromise. Access to it is restricted to a specific and limited number of people within the palace's security apparatus. People whose professional responsibilities include not just the management of that footage, but the specific and active responsibility for ensuring it does not leave the secure environment in which it is stored. For this footage to have leaked, someone in that circle made a decision, a deliberate one, to take what the camera recorded on the night Tom Parker Bowles was found in the vault and to move it into a space where it could reach people outside the palace's secure systems. That decision was not made carelessly. It was made purposefully, by someone who understood exactly what they were doing and exactly what the consequences of doing it would be. The question of why is the one that leads to the most significant dimension of this entire story. Let's start with what the footage actually shows, because the specific content of what has emerged publicly is important to establish before examining why it was released. The corridor footage captures the full sequence described in the account of that night. Tom Parker Bowles is entering the frame. His directed, purposeful movement toward the vault, the pause at the door, the entry, the 4 minutes and 31 seconds of empty corridor. Anne's arrival from the opposite end. She stops at the door. That sequence is clear, and its implications are specific, regardless of how anyone chooses to characterize what was happening inside the vault or why. But sources familiar with the fuller picture of what the leaked material includes suggest the corridor footage is not all of it. There is apparently additional material from other cameras in the security system, footage that captures aspects of that night that the corridor camera alone does not show. The specific nature of this additional material has not been fully established in any public account, but sources describe it as material that addresses the questions that the corridor footage leaves open directly. Specifically, the question of access. How Tom Parker Bowles got through the security protocols that should have prevented an unauthorized person from reaching the vault. Whether the access was logged. What the log shows about who, if anyone, facilitated his entry into the building and into the area where the vault is located. If that material exists and has been leaked alongside the corridor footage, its implications go considerably beyond the already serious question of what Camilla's son was doing in the vault. They go to the question of who else inside the palace is implicated in his being there, and that is the question that decides to leak the footage the most significant act in this story. Because the person who leaked it knew what they were releasing, knew what the corridor footage showed, knew what the additional material shows, and made a deliberate decision that this information should be outside the palace's control, inside a palace that operates on the principle of institutional containment, where the management of sensitive information is not just a communication strategy, but a fundamental operational principle that everyone within the security apparatus understands as a core professional responsibility. A deliberate decision to release security footage of this nature is not a minor act of institutional disloyalty. It is a declaration of something. The specific motivation behind the declaration is the part that sources are most careful about, most circumspect. Because naming the motivation requires naming the person, and naming the person requires a level of specificity about the palace's internal security operations that nobody is yet willing to provide on the record. But the range of possible motivations is not unlimited, and examining each of them points consistently in the same direction. The footage was not leaked to damage Tom Parker Bowles specifically. He is not significant enough, institutionally, to be the primary target of an operation this deliberate and this consequential. The footage was not leaked as a random act of institutional mischief. People with access to Royal Palace security systems do not make casual decisions to release sensitive material. The footage was leaked to produce a specific outcome, in a specific situation, at a specific moment in the internal dynamics of a palace that has been reorganizing itself around its future with an intensity and a pace that has been documented across the months of confrontations and refusals and shutdowns and exclusions that precede this event. Someone wanted this known, outside the palace's control, in the public domain, where it cannot be unshown and cannot be managed back into the ambiguity that institutional silence creates. Someone decided that the events of 2:17 in the morning needed to survive the palace's machinery of containment, and they had both the access and the will to ensure they did. The fallout: what happens to a palace that can no longer contain its own secrets? Once something like this is out, the palace enters a different kind of crisis from the ones it normally manages. The standard palace crisis has a known shape. A story emerges. Communications teams assess the damage. A strategy is determined. Silence, denial, or careful contextualization is deployed depending on the specific nature of what has surfaced. The machinery operates. The story is managed toward a diminishing cycle of coverage that eventually gives way to the next thing. The institution absorbs the impact and continues. That machinery depends on one thing above everything else: the ability to control what information exists in the public domain and what information remains within the institution's walls. The ability to determine the edges of what is known and to manage the space between what is known and what is not. This crisis has removed that ability, not partially, completely. The footage is out. The timestamp is public. The sequence of events in that corridor has been seen by people the palace cannot reach and cannot manage. And the knowledge that there is apparently additional material, footage that goes beyond the corridor camera, that addresses the access question, and potentially the question of who inside the palace facilitated Tom Parker Bowles' presence there. That material, whether or not it surfaces publicly in the coming days and weeks, exists. And its existence changes the nature of every conversation inside the palace about what this situation is and what it requires. Because you cannot manage a crisis whose full dimensions you do not control, the fallout is operating across several layers simultaneously. Each of them is serious. Each of them has implications that extend beyond the immediate incident into the longer story of what the palace is and who has standing within it. Tom Parker Bowles' position is the most immediately unstable. The legal dimension of what occurred that night has not been publicly characterized in formal terms. No charges, no official proceedings, no documented consequence that the public record shows. But sources describe a situation in which the palace's internal assessment of his conduct has been communicated to him with a seriousness that has produced a visible change in his public behavior in the period since the story emerged. He has been quieter, more contained. The media presence that his career normally involves has reduced in the specific way that reduces when someone has been advised by people with serious authority over their situation that a lower profile is appropriate for a period of indeterminate length. That is not the behavior of someone who has been told everything is fine. Camilla's position in the fallout is the dimension that everyone inside those walls is watching most closely, because it combines every previous complication of her institutional standing with a new and qualitatively different kind of vulnerability. The previous confrontations, the Anne meeting, the protocol breach, the refused demand, the shutdown plan, the excluded invitation, the Greenheath eviction, all of those were political, institutional, operating in the space of palace power and its appropriate limits, serious, but navigable in the specific sense that the institution has the tools and the tolerance to manage political confrontations of that type without producing formal consequences. A security breach is different. A security breach involving a family member and questions about prior knowledge and facilitation of access are in a different category entirely. It is not institutional politics. It is institutional integrity. And the tolerance for ambiguity around questions of institutional integrity at this level is considerably lower than the tolerance for the managed tensions of palace power dynamics. The investigation that the palace has been conducting since that night is not a political process. It is a security process, with a different standard of evidence and a different expectation of outcome than the informal management of political confrontations. Security investigations inside institutions of this type produce findings, and findings produce consequences that the informal machinery of palace communications cannot absorb or redirect in the way it handles political stories. What those findings show, and what consequences follow from them, will determine whether Camilla's position survives this in any meaningful operational sense, or whether the vault incident becomes the event that the accumulated weight of everything preceding it was always building toward. William's position in the fallout is the one that sources describe as most strategically significant. Because the vault incident does not just add to the case for the recalibration of Camilla's family's relationship with the institution that his previous decisions have been building, it transforms that case from a series of institutional and political judgments into something with a security dimension that no formal defender of the status quo can argue against. You cannot make the case for maintaining the informal access of a family network that has produced a 2 a.m. security breach of the most sensitive space in the building. The argument does not exist. The political considerations that might otherwise complicate a future king's decisions about who is accommodated within the palace's orbit simply do not apply when the accommodation has produced a documented security failure. William does not need to say anything about the vault incident publicly. He does not need to reference it in any formal communication or use it as explicit justification for any specific decision. It justifies itself, everything he has been doing, retrospectively and completely. And as the palace tries to contain a story whose edges it no longer controls, tries to manage footage it cannot unrelease, tries to find a path through a security breach whose implications extend in directions that none of its standard crisis tools are designed to address. The camera is still rolling, the timestamp is still moving forward, and the corridor that was empty at 2:16 is a very different place from the one it was before 2:17 changed everything. The corridor was empty, and then it was not. A door that should have stayed closed opened anyway. A figure moved through a space he had no business being in, and a woman who was awake when everyone assumed the palace was sleeping walked toward a light that should not have been there. The camera recorded all of it, quietly, without opinion, without the diplomatic cushioning that every other account of what happens inside those walls is eventually wrapped in. Footage does not negotiate. It does not manage impressions or protect positions or maintain the surfaces that institutions depend on. It simply shows what happened. And what happened at 2 a.m. inside that palace has raised questions that no official silence will be able to answer. Hit subscribe. This story is just beginning.